السلام عليكم أصدقاء، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Welcome everybody to the second episode of Teaching Terminologies, in which we are going to discuss 10 important didactic vocabularies.
The first one is authentic materials. Authentic materials are a set of materials like text, audios, videos, newspapers, which are organized and created for real-life uses, but it can be used for learning process. For example, if a teacher finds a paragraph that uses passive voice, so he may bring it to the classroom and help students to understand this lesson by underlining the sentence that uses passive voice.
The second vocabulary in this video is circumlocution. Circumlocution is when the teacher uses a lot of words in order to explain one word. In this situation, as a teacher, you may use a synonym for that word instead of spending a lot of time thinking about finding the exact word. An example for application of circumlocution is if you forget in class about the verb to cry, instead of explaining it using a lot of words like to produce tears from your eyes or to produce liquid from your eyes, you can explain it in one word, which is its synonym like weep, and so on.
The third one is meta-language. Meta-language is a language that is used to talk about language itself. If we take this example, so he looks pale. So we can also say that he looks white as a sheet.
The fourth vocabulary is miming. Miming is to show what a character does by movements or by gestures. For example, if you want to say to someone that somebody is praying, you may say just. So this sign shows that he is praying. This is miming.
The fifth one is visual aid. Visual aid is a set of teaching tools that satisfy the visual needs of learner, like when they use pictures, videos, and so on in the process of learning.
The sixth vocabulary is realia. Realia is the use of real things like pen, ruler, correction pen, and so on in order to teach vocabularies. Here you don't describe words by other words, but you describe vocabularies by real objects.
Drills. Drills are exercises which are meant to practice a vocabulary item, like repetition. For example, when a teacher wants to teach the pronunciation lesson, so he may say a word and the whole class repeats this word again, like cry, and he ordered the other student to repeat it. Cry, 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 cry. Substitution drills. Substitution drills can be explained like this. When a teacher says, my favorite hobby is playing football, then he asks student, what is your favorite hobby? And the student reply, my favorite hobby is dancing. The other reply, my favorite hobby is painting, etc.
Chunks. Chunks are fixed or semi-fixed expressions that are learned or retrieved as a whole and employed in specific occasions. For example, you may take like phrasal verbs, stand up, sit down, shut up, or you're good, like this, excellent work, excellent answer, good mark, and so on. These are all fixed expressions that you use them with each other inside the classroom.
Recycling. Recycling is a teaching method in which teachers review all the vocabularies that have been already taught by including them in meaningful activities in subsequent lessons.
The last vocabulary item in this video is contextualization. Contextualization is using a vocabulary or a word item in a specific context. It seems like recycling. So you use the vocabulary that you learned in a specific context so as to help students grasp the meaning easily and quickly. Finally, this was all about this video. We talked about 10 terminologies, and this was also the second episode in this series. So see you in the next video with the next 10 terminologies. Thanks for watching and see you next video.
السلام عليكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد أشرف المخلوقات والمرسلين. اللهم اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. In this video, so we are going to discuss some of the most important terminologies that you may come across while you are passing the upcoming exam. So here are some interesting teaching terminologies that the teachers of tomorrow must know.
The first type of test is norm referenced test. A norm reference test is a type of test where the performance of students is related to the overall performance of the other students. In other words, it is a type of test when the level of a student is compared to another candidate or to another. It is like a competition to know who is the best or who is the competent. Some example of this test is master exams and teaching exams.
norm reference test. هذا النوع ديال الامتحان ما كيحددش النقطة ديال النجاح. هو مثلا إلا جبتي 10 غادي تنجح ولا بالعكس، هو واحد الامتحان اللي يشوف الأداء ديالك بالمقارنة مع المتبارين الآخرين، عاد كيحددوا النسبة اللي غادي تدوز في هذا الامتحان هذا. مثال على هذا الامتحانات ديال الماستر ولا ديال التعليم. Criterion reference test. It is a type of test in which grading criterion is specified, like in the exams of baccalaureate. If a student gets 10, so he will pass.
النوع الثاني من الاختبارات وهو Criterion Reference Test، بحيث أن هذا النوع من الاختبار هو عكس Norm Reference Test، لأنه يأخذ النقطة بعين الاعتبار. فمثلا في امتحان البكالوريا إذا حصلت على 10 فسوف تنجح. The third terminology is Holistic Scoring. In holistic scoring, the teacher gives students overall assessment score for the paper as a whole. In other words, the teacher gives marks based on his impression. That is to say, it most of the time occurs on test of writing.
في holistic scoring هنا الأستاذ كيعطي واحد النقطة تقديرية، يعني بدون مراعاة لمعايير محددة. يقدر يعجبو غير الخط ولا التنظيم ديال الورقه ديال يعطي نقطه. The fourth teaching terminology is analytic scoring. Here the teacher provides students with a rating score for each criterion. In other words, the process of correction is divided into specific criteria.
Analytic scoring هو العكس تقريبا ديال holistic scoring، لأن في الهوليستيك سكورينج كيكون صحيح شامل، بينما في الاناليتيك سكورينج كيكون صحيح طبقا لواحد معايير محدده، على سبيل المثال جرامر، سبيلينج ميستيكس، بنكتويشن الى اخره. ولكن واحد مقارنه صغيره ربما ما بين الهوليستيك سكورينج والاناليتيك سكورينج، فكنلقاو بان في الاناليتيك سكورينج كيكون صحيح عادل شيئا ما. Elicitation. Elicitation is considered as a subscale by which the teacher guides students to find the target words instead of giving it to them. In another word, as a teacher, you ask students questions about some words and you let them find answers by themselves. Elicitation states that learners should construct knowledge by themselves.
Elicitation هي واحد المهارة اللي كيخدمها الأستاذ. مثلا هو كيعطي تعريف ديال واحد الكلمة للتلاميذ، وكيخلي التلاميذ يفكروا ويخدموا الذكاء ديالهم باش يلقاو التعريف ديال ديك الكلمة. والفرق هنا شنو هو؟ ان الاستاذ ما كيعطيش ديك الكلمه، ما كيعطيش الجواب ديال داك التعريف، حتى كيلقاوها التلاميذ بوحدهم. بمعنى ان elicitation هي واحد المهاره اللي كتخلي التلميذ يبني المعارف ديالو نفسه بنفسه. The last terminology is learner-centeredness. Learner-centeredness is a new concept developed with the cognitivist theory. It assumes that the learner should be in the center of the process of learning. It is very important because the educational system today depend on it.
آخر مصطلح في هذا الفيديو وهو Learner-Centeredness. أهم فكرة ديال هذا Learner-Centeredness هو أن المتعلم هو محور عملية التعلم والتعليم. So this was all about this video. We've discussed 6 important terminologies which are norm-referenced test,
Criterion-referenced test,
holistic scoring,
analytic scoring,
elicitation.
learner-centeredness.
This was all about this video, and if you have any kind of questions, don't hesitate to leave them as a comment below. Thanks for watching and see you next video with a new lesson. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Welcome everybody to the third episode in English didactic terminology, and in this episode we are going to discuss 7 important other terminologies.
The first one is scaffolding. Scaffolding is stated by Vygotsky. It is included in the field of social constructivism. However, scaffolding is the process of supporting learners in solving their learning problems. In addition to this, it is the support needed to assist students in achieving their learning goals. Ultimately, the target or the goal of scaffolding is to eliminate the path of the learners.
أستاذ جمال، مازال ما وضحليش الفكرة مزيان. Can you scaffold this idea?
Okay, of course. انت دابا استعملتي الورد ديال سكافولد.
نعم.
وسكافولد كتعني بحال الا قلتي ازاله الغطاء على شي حاجه، ولا بحال الا قلتي كتوضح ديك الصوره لشخص ما. وهنا in the field of the educational system, scaffolding means the support، يعني الدعم. يعني ان التلميذ خصو دائما يلقى داك الدعم والارشاد، سواء من الاستاذ ولا من الاباء ديالو ولا شي موجه. المهم الدعم والارشاد خصو يكون متابعين.
يعني خصك تبين له
طريق سكافولد. وها سكافولدين يعني كاينين الناس اللي معتمين بها، هما اللي سماهم فيغوتسكي الام كي او. more بمعنى more knowledgeable others.
more knowledgeable others.
يعني واحد
آخر عنده معرفة أكثر.
أشنو كتعني more knowledgeable others؟ هي بحال إلا قلتي كل شخص كيعرف أكثر منك. وعنده زعما عنده أفكار وعنده هذا باش يساعدك ويدعمك، وهذا باش تمشي.
يوضح للتلميذ الطريق.
يعاونوا support.
يعني he should scaffold his path. scaffold. Thank you very much.
Not at all.
The second terminology in this video is monitoring. Monitoring means that the teacher, when the teacher gives a task to the students, he keeps moving on the class so as to check whether the students are on the task or not.
أستاذ عبد الرزاق، واش ممكن توضح لنا أكثر شنو هو الدور ديال المونيتورين داخل القسم؟
Yeah, of course. المونيتورين كما قلنا هو ان الاستاذ ملي كيعطي واحد التاسك، ملي كيعطي واحد المهمه، واحد التمرين للتلاميذ، كيبقى يعني دائما كيدور على التلاميذ باش كيشوفهم واش راهم في التاسك ولا لا، كيراقبهم. هذه هي مونيتور. تو مونيتور
مركزين مع التمرين ولا كاين اللي كيدير الشغب ولا
كاين يبقى ديما مراقب في الكلاس. هذه هي تو مونيتور. تو مونيتور صافي تتحكم فيه، تتحكم في ذاك التمرين انه يدار بشكل صحيح ويكون ما يكونش لا ضجيج لا والو. هذه هي monitoring.
The third one is pedagogical contract. Pedagogical contract is an implicit or explicit contract that a teacher establishes with their students in the first encounter. This contract includes principally the rules of the classroom or the code of contact inside the classroom. So the teacher and the student agree upon certain rules and vote to obey them. So here, any violation would subject the violator to a punishment which is determined by both the teacher and the student.
بحال فهمت بحال مازال. كونتراكت بيداغوجية واش زعما شي كونطرا ولا؟
Okay. كونتراكت بيداغوجي هي كتسمى بالعربيه التعاقد البيداغوجي.
التعاقد البيداغوجي يعني تعاقد خاص بالبيداغوجيه
بحال لي كونطرا عاديين هكا، ولكن هذه كتسمى بحال الا قلتي بحال واحد قانون داخلي في الكلاس كيكتبوه في الورقه، بحال الا كيتفقوا الاستاذ والتلاميذ باش بحال ما يخرقوش دوك القوانين. مثلا الا جا التلميذ معطل شنو هي العقوبه ديالو، الا كيدير الصداع شنو هي العقوبه ديالو. يعني الا بغيتي نقولوا بطريقه اوضح، ما لك وما عليك داخل هذا القسم.
اذا ضغطتي مسكه مثلا راه يوقع لك هذه، الا درت كذا
داكشي اللي كاين. يعني ما لك وما عليك، يعني كيكونوا واحد بحال الا قلتي مجموعه من القواعد والقوانين اللي كتحتار داخل القسم ما بين الاستاذ وهذا.
اذا هذه هي Pedagogical Contract
التعاقد البيداغوجي.
Thank you very much.
Not at all.
The fourth terminology is ZPD, which means Zone of Proximal Development. According to the Zone of Proximal Development, the task which is given to the student shouldn't go beyond his ability or his capability of understanding. To simplify things more, in relation to the classroom, when a teacher gives a task to the students, it shouldn't be so difficult so as not to be frustrating for the students, as well as it shouldn't be so easy so as not to be boring for students.
مازال واحد شويه ديال الغموض، ممكن تزيد توضح لينا شويه الله يسهل عليك.
يا طبيعه الحال. Zone of Proximal Development من الاسم ديالها، من Proximal أي أنها يعني كتعني بحال التوازن. يعني أنه تاسك اللي كتعطي للتلميذ أو امتحان ولا أي حاجة ما خاصش يكون صعيب بزاف وما خاصش يكون سهل بزاف. إذا كان صعيب بزاف غادي يكره المادة وغايجي داك الشيء قاصح، يعتبروا بأنه راه خلف الفهم ديالو. وإذا كان سهل بزاف يعتبر بأن الشيء سهل بزاف، ونفس الشيء غادي عاوتاني يولي مميز بالنسبة له.
يعني قدر
المعرفة ديالو. قريته مثلا باسي فويس بريزنت سيمبل وباس سيمبل وكذا، تمتحنوا في ذاك الدروس هذيك باش
وما تعطيش شي تمارين اللي
قاصحين بزاف اللي كثر من الليفل ديالو. حيت نيت هاد الدروس هذوك كيتقراو يعني في ادفانس وفي كذا وكذا، خاصك تمشي انت مع النيفو باش يبقى دائما واحد التوازن. هذه هي zone of proximal development.
The fifth one is brainstorming. So brainstorming is when the learner generates ideas about a certain topic. So this technique is all the time or at the most used in writing activities. Moreover, so it is a process of gathering information about a certain topic before starting to write it.
أنا اللي كنعرف أن brain هو العقل والstorm هي العاصفة. وكيفاش brainstorming عندها علاقة مع teaching؟
اوكي، brainstorming هي بحال الا قلتي لها بغينا نعطيوها شي شرح مبسط هكا. بحال الا قلتي الافكار كيتحطوا في الدماغ ديالك بحال العاصفه، كلشي مرون، كلشي هذا حتى حاجه ما في بلاصتها. هذه هي brainstorming. يعني الافكار بحال الا قلتي كيتحطوا في دماغك ما مقادين ما مرتبين ما هذا.
فاش كتبغي مثلا تكتب شي موضوع
كتفكر وكدير الافكار كيضرب لك فكره هنا بحال العاصفه ما مرتبين ما والو.
That's why it's brainstorming.
That's why they call it brainstorming. هنا كتحط الافكار ديالك بشويه، كتجبدهم من ديك العاصفه وكتحط بشويه، عاد كتبدا الرايتين ديالك ترتب فيهم. ترتب كاع اللي جات الفكره، اي فكره جات في راسك كتكتبها وتكتب عاد كتبدا الايساي ديالك ولا الرايتين ولا الباراجراف ولا.
نفهم شنو هي brainstorming. كتحمقاني برين العقل ستورم العاصفه. Thank you very much. The sixth terminology is editing. Editing is when the learners work on their writing product to correct spelling, grammar, punctuation, and so on.
The last one is the checklist. The checklist is a list which is provided by the teacher to identify the areas that students should focus on while correcting their mistakes.
Finally, this video was about 7 terminologies of English didactic, and it was actually the third episode. We've discussed more terminologies and we are going to discuss more in the coming videos. Thanks for watching and see you next video with a new lesson. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Welcome everybody to the fourth episode of English Didactic Terminologies, in which we are going to discuss and to cover a couple of terminologies that you haven't seen yet.
Consciousness rising, or in other words, awareness rising, is a process learners go through when they are trying to learn a new language, which means learner must be aware of language itself. That is to say, they must recognize and distinguish a language when they hear it for the first time. As a final step, they will be able to produce it.
According to Chomsky, competence is a system of rules that represents a learner's knowledge of a language. Competence is often constructed with performance. However, performance is the practical form of competence.
But competency is a set of skills, abilities, and knowledge that a student or a learner use in order to accomplish a particular task. What about communicative competence?
Communicative competence, as Haim suggests, refers to the learner's knowledge of grammatical competence, which means knowledge of phonology, phonetics, semantics, syntax, morphology, and grammar. Can you tell us what is social linguistics competence?
Social linguistics competence is the knowledge of how to use language and respond to a different speech acts, such as request. Also, it is the knowledge of which address forms to use and in which context. For example, you cannot tell your friend to tell you a joke when you are in a funeral. So, tell us what is the definition of the discourse competence.
As concisely as possible, discourse competence is knowing how to begin and end a conversation. Then, what is strategic competence?
Strategy competence is the knowledge of communicative strategy. So Himes summarizes this in saying when to say, how to say, and what to say, and to whom to say. We still need to know what we mean by warm-up.
Warm-ups are pre-arranged activities that are often enjoyable and fun for the students. Warm-ups are typically used to make students feel at ease and help them engage in the process of learning. More often than not, they are employed in the beginning of the lesson, as opposed to the review, which is introduced at the end of the lesson. An example of warm-up is tongue twist. For example, Sarah sits with 6 sippy liquors. Finally, this video was about 7 terminologies that are most often used with competence, with the word competence, and see you the next video with new terminologies. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.
Assalamu alaikum, bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin, ashrafil makhluqati wal mursalin. Allahumma shrah li sadri wassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Welcome to the 5th episode of English Didactic Terminology, in which we are going to define a couple of terminologies that have a relation with the process of learning and teaching.
So the first terminology in this video is called intonation. Intonation means that when speaking, we change the pitch of our voice and put stress on a particular sound so as to express a particular emotion or feelings. As an example, if you are happy and your friend asks you to come with him, you may say, "Yeah, I will come with you. Yeah, I will come with you." Or, "No, I'm sorry, I will not come with you." It's ordinary. But if you are angry, then you say, "No, I will not come with you. I will not come with you." Here, what do? You just change the pitch of your voice and put stress on the letter W. I will. So this is what we mean by intonation.
The second terminology is called intake. Intake refers to the language that learners internalize, which means take in while being exposed to the language input. In other words, what learners or students grasp while they are exposed to a new language.
Input as opposed to output. Input refers to the verbal and the written language that students get, that students take in. And output refers also to the verbal and written language that students produce, which means the productive use of a language. To explain more, while learning a language, you are exposed to 4 criteria, which are listening, reading, writing, and speaking. So, the first 2 results in the second other 2. That is to say, when you read, you take in vocabularies and you use them while writing. So reading is an input and writing is an output. Also, when you listen to videos and music and so on, you take in how to pronounce vocabularies and words. So this is an input which results in speaking correctly, which is an output. So this is what we mean by input and output.
The fourth terminology is SQ4R, which means the reading strategy that involves 5 stages. Surveying in searching for the gist, which means the central meaning, and also asking questions, reading and answering the previous asked inquiries, reciting the main idea of the text, reviewing the main idea of each section of the text, as well as the main idea of the text in its entirety, and reflecting about the significance of the text to you.
The fifth terminology is recognition exercises. It is a type of exercises in which students are required to recognize an answer or the correct answer out of a variety of options. For example, students might be asked to choose the correct meaning of a word. For example, students are given different words with different meanings on the right side, and they are required to match each word with its right and correct meaning.
The sixth terminology is productive exercises. Productive exercises are exercises in which learners are instructed to produce answers instead of giving options to choose from.
The last terminology in this video is feedback. Feedback is found everywhere, it is used everywhere. When you speak to someone and he answers, that's a feedback. But concerning teaching process, feedback refers to the commands and other information that students receive concerning their success in completing tasks or tests. Feedback can be given by a teacher or other person. It can be written or oral. This is a feedback.
Finally, this video was about 7 didactic terminology, which are intonation, intake, output, inputs, CQ4R, recognition exercises, and productive exercises, lastly feedback. So, see you next video with a new English didactic terminologies. السلام عليكم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد أشرف المخلوقات والمرسلين اللهم اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. In this video we are going to discuss the definition of assessment, the types of assessment, and some other terminologies that are included in the process of assessment. In addition to this, we are going to discuss some testing tools that teachers use to assess the ability and performance of students. Can you tell us what is assessment?
Yeah, of course. Assessment is a noun that is extracted or come from the verb to assess. And to assess is to evaluate in order to determine the level.
Good.
To clarify things more, assessment is the process whereby the teacher gathers information about the performance or the ability of the students. In another word, it's an ongoing process in which the teacher collects information about both the competence and the performance of the students. Hello, sir. Can you tell us what are the types of assessment?
For sure, there are 2 types of assessment. The formative assessment and summative assessment.
Is there any difference between summative and formative assessment?
Yes, there is a big difference between them. Formative assessment is the process of assessing students' performance during the lesson. It is taken constantly. The purpose is not to assign grades to students, but to receive data about them which can help teachers adapt their teaching methods to meet students' needs. ما يصطلح عليه باللغة العربية بالتقويم التكويني داخل الحصة، وبمعنى أدق المشاركة داخل الحصة. هنا الأستاذ كيجمع معلومات حول التلاميذ كل حصة باش يشوف الطريقة المناسبة اللي غادي يخدمها في المنهاج الدراسي واللي غادي توالم التلاميذ ديالو.
The second type of assessment is summative assessment. It's a formal type of assessment which aims at making judgment about the student's performance or ability by assigning grades to them. It occurs periodically, either at the end of a unit, a semester, or a year. Its representative can be a quiz, an exam, or a test. باش نبسطوا الأمر أكثر، summative assessment بالعربية هو التقويم الإجمالي. أي أن أستاذ كيقوم بواحد التقويم إجمالي للتلميذ اللي كيشوف فيه المستوى ديالو فين وصل أو الأداء ديالو فين وصل عبر التنقيط، يعني عبر إعطاء النقط. هذا هو summative assessment، وأكيد كيوقع يعني periodically أي أنه من وقت لوقت، إما في نهاية الوحدة أو في نهاية السنة أو في نهاية السمستر يعني الفصل. Do you think that we have finished yet?
Not yet. Up till now, we have just mentioned the difference between formative and summative assessment. Concerning the formative assessment, which is gathering information about the student during the lesson.
Yeah.
But in the summative assessment, so the teacher evaluates the competence or the ability of the student through test.
Yeah.
As we have mentioned the word test,
Yes.
so let us know some types of it, or the types of tests that teachers should use.
Thank you very much.
Not
So
at all.
let's speak about the types of tests.
Okay, the first type of this test is the proficiency test. The major aim of this test is to measure the student's ability and performance in the target language. In other words, so it is about how much the students know about language or how well he uses it. هذا النوع ديال التيست ولا ديال الامتحان هو اللي كدوزو اما باش تحصل على وظيفة ولا باش غادي تكمل قرايتك على برا. مثال الايلتس والتوفل.
The second type of test is diagnostic test. The main purpose of this test is to discover the weaknesses and the strengths of the students in a language. For example, some students are weak in grammar, while others are weak in communication, while others in writing, and so on. So this type of test is done in the beginning of the year, course or a unit. إذا باش نبسطوا الأمور أكثر، diagnostic test قلنا هو التقويم التشخيصي. هذا التقويم التشخيصي كيتستخدم في بداية السنة أو بداية الوحدة باش نعرفوا نقاط القوة ونقاط الضعف ديال التلميذ، باش الأستاذ يعرف كيفاش يتعامل معه. مثلا بعض التلاميذ عندهم ضعف في الكتابة الرايتين، بعضهم عندهم ضعف في الجرامر، بعضهم في علم اللسانيات إلى آخره. هنا خصنا نخدموا هذا التقويم التشخيصي باش نعرفوا كيفاش نخدموا مع التلميذ هذا.
Thirdly, placement test. It is a kind of test which aims at placing students in the teaching program most appropriate to their ability. In other words, it places students in a group which suits their levels. باش نفهموا أكثر، هذا النوع ديال التيست ولا امتحان هو اختبار المستوى اللي غادي توضع فيه التلميذ. بمعنى آخر، واش غادي توضع مع المبتدئين ولا المتوسطين ولا اللي النيفو ديالهم عالي. وهذا النوع ديال التيست كنلقاوهم دائما في لي سونتر، بمعنى بحال سونتر امريكان ولا بريتيش كونسل، هما اللي كيخدموا هذا النوع ديال التيست.
The fourth type of test is called achievement test. In another word, this kind of test is done for the learner to achieve something. It's mostly known in Morocco for the baccalaureate students. At the end of the year, they take an English exam in which they are examined in all the lessons that they have learned throughout the year in order to get the certificate at the end of the year. للتفسير أكثر achievement text هو اللي كياخذوا التلميذ، يعني كيديروا التلميذ علاش باش يحقق واحد الغرض واحد المبتغى منه. عطينا اكزامبل بالامتحان ديال البكالوريا. التلميذ كيتمتحن في جميع الدروس اللي قراهم في الباك، يعني مثلا passive voice, tenses, conditionals and so on at the end of the year باش يحصل له واحد النقطة اللي غتعامل انه ينجح باش يحصل على الشهادة. هذا هو الاتشيفمنت تيست، جاية for achieving something، لتحقيق واحد الغرض.
How do we know that the test is effective?
It's an easy matter. We can know that the test is effective through 4 stages, which are reliability, validity, authenticity, and practicality.
What do you mean by each of them?
Okay, we mean by reliability that the test should achieve the same result when it is administered. That is to say, when it is corrected by another teacher, the student should get the same result. معنى آخر reliability هي أن التلميذ خصو يحصل على نفس النقطة فاش الامتحان ديالو يتصحح من طرف أستاذ واحد آخر.
Validity stated that the test should include what the student have studied in the classroom, no more, no less, and it should be well organized. بمعنى آخر أن هذا النوع ديال الامتحان خصو يكون well organized، منظم وكيتماشى مع القدرات ديال التلاميذ.
Authenticity means that the teacher should use in the test the language that the students are familiar with. For example, if the teacher taught the students the irregular verbs, he or she should use those irregular verbs in the test. ببساطة أكثر أن الأستاذ خاصو يمتحن التلاميذ في داك الشيء اللي قراوه في الكلاس. مثلا قراهم واحد specific irregular verbs خاصو يستخدموهم هما نيت في الامتحان.
Practicality is a test that does not take much time for students to accomplish and at the same time easy for the teachers to correct. Practicality هو واحد الامتحان اللي فعال لا بالنسبة للدراري ولا بالنسبة للأستاذ.
Finally, that was all about assessment. We discussed definition, types of assessment, as well as types of tests and the effectiveness of the test. So that was all. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video with a new lesson. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. What is the definition of classroom management?
What are the major tips that a teacher must follow to reach a successful classroom management?
What is the role and the behavior of the teacher inside the classroom?
Classroom management refers to the multidimensional and varied ways in which learner behaviors, movements, interaction are organized by a teacher during the lesson to make teaching conducive to effective learning.
As another definition, classroom management is a term used by teachers in order to describe the process they go through to ensure that the classroom runs smoothly without disruptive behaviors.
Let's know some basic tips that a teacher must follow in order to reach a well-organized and successful classroom management.
Let us discover some roles and behaviors of a teacher inside the classroom. The teacher has several roles inside the classroom, like controller,
organizer,
a participant and a source.
In addition to this, the teacher must
be smiling,
be kind and strict when needed.
Also, the teacher must be patient and observer.
There are some rules and orders that must be obeyed inside the classroom.
In addition to some formal rules like be on time, respect your teacher and your classmates, the teacher has also the right to order his or her students. For example, sit down, stand up, go out, write down, and so on. Teacher Jamal, can you tell us some ways to avoid and prevent the disruptive behaviors from students?
For sure. So there are many ways to avoid and prevent the disruptive behavior inside the classroom. As a good teacher, so you can avoid this kind of behaviors by a careful planning of the lesson. When the lesson is clearly planned and organized, the student's attention will be kept on the task. As a result, so the learning gap will not be allowed.
The second way is fairness. That is to say, the teacher should always avoid having favorite students or picking up particular individuals. In another word, the teacher should be fair with students inside the classroom.
The third way is to establish interpersonal relationship. Because if students respect each other, they are more likely to cooperate inside the classroom.
The fourth and the last way is methodology. That's to say, the methods and approaches which should be used by a teacher inside the classroom. In another word, the teacher should avoid boring classes by using variety of techniques, and also he or she should time his or her activities carefully. For example, as a planning, you may specify 15 minutes for grammar and 15 minutes for communication or skills. So, if you overpass these 15 minutes, you may create such a kind of boringness inside the classroom.
How can teachers avoid raising problems by students?
It's a phenomenon that occurs always, but there are some ways to do it. We can avoid raising problems by students by, as a teacher, when a naughty student in your class raises a problem, you shouldn't wait, but you should react immediately.
You as a teacher should not use threats.
You should also deal with the problem quickly. What if the problem has been exploded?
Also, there are ways to avoid this. Don't raise your voice and try to calm down as much as possible.
Also, try to avoid talking to the students within his friends, but wait until the class ends and then speak to the students individually. Let's imagine that this student is uncontrollable and he or she wants to raise more problems. In this situation, you may write a report to the administrator so as to call the father of that student.
To sum up, the perfect or the effective way to control your classroom depends on the way you reward students. In other words, the method of rewarding and how a teacher can apply it inside the classroom successfully.
Finally, this video was about the classroom management. We tried to cover most of the ideas about this topic, and I hope that you understood. If we didn't mention anything you know, or if we missed anything, please tell us in a comment. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video with a new lesson.
السلام عليكم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد أشرف المخلوقات والمرسلين اللهم اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. In this video, so we are going to discuss lesson plan as concisely as possible.
So, as you know, lesson plan is a wide and a very important topic which is discussed by many authors in many books. So in this video, we try to squeeze down all this information so as to give you the most important ideas about the lesson plan. And at the end of the video, we will provide you also with an example of a lesson plan that you may use in your class.
First, what is a lesson plan?
What are the most important components that you need to organize a well lesson plan?
Why the lesson plan is important in the process of learning?
Lesson plan is a teacher's detailed description of the course of instruction. However, it is a teaching tool that help the teacher to decide
what to teach,
how to teach,
when to teach,
and why to teach.
That is to say, every lesson plan must contain a title, a time required to complete a lesson, a list of materials, and a list of objectives.
So, the most important components that a lesson plan must contain are
the title. The title is the most important part. So here you have to begin with the course of subject, the grade level, and the name.
Date. The date is the time when the teacher performs the lesson. And here, the majority of the teachers forget changing the time. That is to say, they keep the time of the previous lessons. And here, if you don't change the time, it means one of the two. Either you are using the previous lesson plans, or the second one is that you are lazy and you don't want to prepare another lesson plan.
Objective. Objective means that each lesson should have a learning goal which is described as SMART. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, result in time bound.
Plan. Plan means that any lesson must have beginning, middle, and the end, which means that you should divide your lesson into a sequence of activities and times.
Assessment. Assessment means that each objective with its aligned standards must be assessed for student comprehension and success. That is to say, you as a teacher, so you have to use the formative assessment in order to know if the student understands the lesson or not.
Homework. You should also add to your lesson plan the homework that you will give to the students to do in their home at the end of the class, which means the duty and the tasks that the students should do after the end of the class.
Technology. Technology is to add technology skills and standards into lessons if it is possible. That is to say, as a teacher, so you may use some materials like laptop, data show that may help students to understand more.
But why the lesson plan is important? Simply because it works as a guide for the teacher. The teachers don't have to think on their feet. It gives them a starting point. In other words, teachers have a clear procedure to follow. That is to say, if the teachers don't plan their lesson, they will get lost and confused. Moreover, a well-organized lesson plan gives the teacher a sense of security and confidence.
Concerning students, they realize that their teachers cares for their learning and they appreciate the teacher's work as a model of a well-organized work to follow.
To sum up, a well-organized teacher is a source of energy and enthusiasm inside the classroom. This suggests a level of professionalism and real commitment. Finally, this video was about the lesson plan. We tried to cover the most important components of the lesson plan, and in order to clarify the image more, here is a good example that summarizes all the main important ones. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video with a new lesson.